we're dealing with motion 4 on the agenda, which is about the sanctions campaign as part of our central focus of the campaigning in the current period. Can I apologise for being late? Some of you may know my 85-year-old mum has broken her leg and has just had an op, so I'm dashing up there to see it, and is fairly buoyant, saying she's out for this football season, but she'll be back for next, which is quite good. And I've also been tied up with the threat on the third runway at Heathrow in my constituency. We've had further meetings today. Let me just stand back a minute and try and situate the sanctions campaign and where I think we're at as a campaign, because I think we need to try and be as objective here as possible. I know you've had some of this debate today, and let me just give you my views on it. If we just stand back and see what is the threat at the moment, this issue about things have moved on with the process, with Bush going and Obama coming in, and have we now in some way reduced the threat of military intervention? Bush is going. He's only got a month to go. You never know what the cretin's going to do next, so don't hold your breath. Anything could happen. But with Obama coming in and the noises made about the need for discussions rather than direct military intervention, I don't think lessens us in terms of our maintaining our guard about the threat of military action. Certainly, whatever Obama's statements are, once you come into power and the hawks swoop around you, I think attitudes may well change. But also, I think what we know from the statements and leaks that have come out from the Israeli government, past and present, we know of their military preparedness for strikes. And if that does happen, I think if the Israelis do take what they would describe as strategic strikes against Iran, it may well force the Obama government to swing in behind in support and may well escalate. So I don't think we should reduce our guard by any means about the threat of military action. I'm anxious in the extreme. The issue around dialogue, well, we'll see. We'll want to promote as much dialogue as possible, but it's got to be in the context of the whole of the Middle East and the issues around Iraq and also around the Palestinians. And what we want to see happening out of America is a serious discussion about the long-term future of its own role and hopefully withdraw from the region. So therefore, the soft option in terms of their politics, the US politics, is to proceed with sanctions and to maintain them and possibly intensify sanctions. Now, my view is, as set out in the note that's been circulated, sanctions are just military action by another means. They're another form of attacking people. And if we've learned anything from our experience in the recent period, certainly from Iraq, the use of sanctions, it's not a matter of principle, this is a matter of practicalities of what effect can sanctions have in certain contexts. If you look at our experience in Iraq, and there were a number of delegations out from Iraq, from the campaign group and from a number of our campaigns during the sanctions regime, and the people that were, first of all, the people that were suffering were working class, and they suffered as a result of, first of all, the sanctions preventing much needed resources going into the country, and we had delegations that toured the hospitals at that point in time and witnessed the number of people that were suffering and also the number of child deaths that were resulted as a result of the sanctions themselves. And in addition to that, this argument that this will motivate people against the existing regime, well, it didn't in Iraq. Quite the reverse. What happened was that the Iraqi regime controlled the resources themselves, and as those resources became limited, they rationed them. Increased the control of the regime over those resources and therefore over those communities. So instead of stimulating revolt, it actually intensified the element of control by the regime itself. And I have to say also there was this bizarre thing in Iraq too. There was evidence of how it brought people together in support of that regime, because it was seen as an external force that was implementing these sanctions against, and the use of propaganda by Saddam Hussein and others against the Iraqi people. So in some instances, the use of sanctions may well prove effective, particularly if they're affecting capital on its own, and we saw that the undermining of international capital within South Africa may well have been effective, but in this instance, in the example that we had with Iraq, quite the reverse. It looks as though it suppressed revolt rather than encouraging it, hurt the people that we're trying to protect and whose rights we're trying to we're trying to enhance, and at the same time bolster the controls of the existing regime. So that's why, at this point in time, this move from direct military intervention no longer being the threat, which I'm not convinced about, but then move towards, yes, well, let's use sanctions to bring down this regime, is the one that we've got to be fearful of, because it's so attractive to those people who, will think of themselves as progressive, and then others who want to give themselves a progressive cover for imperialist action. Now, I think in this coming period we need to expose it. We need to expose the role of sanctions, and we need to see what the alternatives are. And what the alternatives are is continuing the campaign to support those that are in struggle within Iran itself and support of the people of Iran. That's why we were founded. It's hands off the people of Iran. It's not about hands off the Iranian regime or anything like that. It's hands off the people. Our job is to protect the people. And one of the ways that we do that is to continue to expose what's going on within Iran. Now, we've been, I think, and I pay tribute to, I did so last year, and I pay tribute again to the Hands Up People of Iran campaign and the key organisers of that. We've been able to do that. We've been able to, I think, expose what's been going on, and we've been able to educate and raise consciousness within the labour and trade union movement of this country in a way that others haven't, in a way that we haven't done in the past. And that's why we were so pleased about the affiliations of various unions to the campaign itself, that enabled us then to have a direct relationship with those unions to expose what's happening and raise levels of consciousness within that section of the labour and trade union movement. I think it's hard work, but that's what we have to do now and continue on with. In terms of the work that in the trade unions, we might be facilitating in this coming period. As you know, we've established the Trade Union Coordinating Group, which has brought together half a dozen of the campaigning, the fighting unions, to work together on a range of political issues. I think one of the issues that we might want to put to them is this issue, the issue of Iran, but also the issue around sanctions, and see whether or not the TUCG will endorse that campaign and help us in mobilising other unions in support of it. Within Parliament itself, can I just say we've struggled. Jeremy Corbyn, what a star, continues to do the best he possibly can in raising issues itself, but this will be one of the focus of our parliamentary work in the coming period, raising the issue around sanctions and their impact upon the Iranian people, and how they're not an alternative to the longer-term struggle which is empowering people themselves in revolt within that country itself. In terms of the wider labour and trade union movement, can I just say the LRC and the other organisations that we have, I think we need to look again at how we permeate them more effectively, and how we use those organisations to spread this word, because I don't think they'll be immune to this argument that sanctions will be a more effective way once Barack Obama comes into power. If the argument is the military threat has been reduced, the intensification of sanctions some may well be attracted to that strategy. And I think we need to do a job of work which explains to people exactly what the impact of sanctions will have. So far as I can see, if we move on to what's happening within the British government itself, there's been no shift in policy whatsoever. I think quite the reverse. I think we may well be going backwards. There seems to be almost a retrenchment in terms of the discussions in government around the Middle East itself. Barely a condemnation of the role of Israel. The relationship to the Palestinian struggle now seems to have been sort of outsourced to Tony Blair to wander around making bizarre statements and whining and dining various world leaders, but not going very far with it at all. And so that seems to have allowed the UK government almost to abstain from the debate around this issue. And I think that what's happened is Miliband and Brown have taken a view, well, they'll wait till Barack Obama comes into power and they'll follow whatever lead is given by the US. And there's no seem to independent policy analysis or independent policy voice from the UK government. So I think that, again, gives us a role in terms of focusing about what the British role in all of this is and what demands we should be placing on the British government itself. And we'll try and do that through the labour and trade union movement, and yes, again, in Parliament itself. The other issue then is how do we link up with the individual struggles within Iran itself? Despite all the oppression that has taken place, nevertheless, brave people and brave members of organisations, through courage, are standing up and maintaining that struggle, whether they be students, trade unionists, individuals, artists, authors, whatever. They're still there. They're still willing to demand freedom. They're still willing to expose and campaign around injustices. And I think maybe in this coming period, what we need to do is look at how we link up with those individual struggles more effectively. If they can't communicate within their own country, and again, this use of sanctions to deny people the access to the internet is bizarre behaviour, of completely counterproductive in terms of trying to expose what's happening in Iran. But if they can't find a platform in their own country, maybe we could try and provide a platform here as much as we possibly can. And that means taking up individual struggles, trying to use the media here, and trying to use the platforms of the labour trade union movement and Parliament itself to expose what's going on. So what I'm suggesting is a fairly intensive period of activity, of raising consciousness around about what's happening in Iran again, diverting people from the use of sanctions as the soft option as against military intervention, continuing to make sure people are on their guard about military intervention, and then again trying to support as best we can those progressive struggles within Iran itself. Can I say also, I just think there may well be an attempt to just close down all debate in the coming period. And then we've got an opportunity in April. On April the 2nd, the G20 will be meeting here. Its main focus will be around the recession and where do we go from here in terms of the impact of the recession on the global economy. We've got an opportunity where, as all those world leaders assembled in London, and Brown thought this was a coup to bring all these world leaders here. I think we could turn that around. One of my view is what we should be doing now is planning the alternative G20, and not even describing it as G20, but open up the opportunity of debate in this country whilst the G20 leaders are meeting. Open up the opportunity of progressive forces to come together in this country to debate where do we go from here, inviting trade unionists and progressives and socialists and progressive campaigners around human rights issues as well to actually come to London, and that we prepare in advance of the G20 to focus a set of demands on those world leaders as they arrive. And one of those demands would be around Iran, because it isn't just a debate around the economy. These world leaders will be meeting to look at how they have an impact in the long term on a whole range of global issues. And one of the key global issues will be the Middle East and what happens over control of oil and control of resources. So I think there's a focus of our work for this coming period isn't around sanctions, but also to try and put this issue on the agenda, amongst other issues, and use the G20 meeting here as an opportunity to do that. And I just wonder whether, in terms of the labour and trade union movement and progressive movement in this country, whether we're up to that challenge. It would require a fair amount of organisation. But actually, I think if the call went out for progressive causes to come to London during that period, I think people would turn up. I think people would come, and it would give the focus on the G20 of the real world, of what's happening on human rights abuses, what's happening in terms of poverty, what's happening in terms of their imperialist policies, particularly within the Middle East. It would give a real focus of demands that could be placed on the G20, and it would be the real world as against this bizarre cosy negotiations and discussions about the reinvention of Keynesianism by a number of world leaders when it doesn't really work anyway. So I think we need to look creatively about how we use those opportunities. Finally, can I just say we've progressed significantly, I think, in the coming period in terms of the hands-off for the people of Iran, the affiliations with unions, the raising the level of debate, etc. But we all need to be a bit self-critical. And I see it's almost a standard resolution here, which is about the meetings of the steering committee being poorly advertised and London-centric. Actually, I think it's a motion that was passed at the LRC, but never mind. Can I just say, this is self-criticism. In terms of what we can do as MPs, as a group of MPs who have been working on this issue, I think we need to take a more systematic approach. And I raised this last year. It can't just be left to Jeremy Corbyn and a couple of others. So as part of the sanctions campaign now, we'll look for a strategy of raising the issue in Parliament around early day motions, adjournment debates, etc., harassing ministers in parliamentary questions, and try and use that as a platform for HOPI to try and raise the issue and expose what's happening. And in that way, I think each of us, as we go back from today's conference, need to think through in a self-critique, with a self-critique really, about what role can we play in this coming period around this campaign. Certainly for the parliamentary side, I don't think we've done enough, and we'll look at it again and see how we can intensify. From a trade union point of view, within my own union, Unison, etc., I think again we need to look at how we intervene within that particular union, how we use as best we can the left caucuses that we can to put this issue back onto the central agenda again, because people always think, well, it's gone away. You know, the threat of invasion has gone away. The sanctions will just continue on as before. I don't think any of that's happening. And as we speak, of course, the Iranians themselves, the Iranian working class, suffer. And I think what we're in fear of is that they'll continue to suffer in almost silence in terms of the coverage within the world itself, unless we act. So I think we have a big responsibility. I think hands-off people of Iran have played an exceptional role in raising consciousness, but we need to go to the next plateau. So in being self-critical, that's what I'll be going back, thinking with other MPs about how we play that more effective role. I think we all need to do that. The sanctions campaign could give us that focus in this coming period to be that more effective. So